think everyone is in who needs to be in. So welcome everyone. Actually welcome NIRSA family, I'd like to say, because this kind of came about because of the sense of belonging that I have felt in NIRSA and the wonderful people I have met and grown to learn from and share. And so today's webinar is called Inclusive Workplace from a Women Leadership Lens. And it stemmed from some conversations that I've had with again, NIRSA family, friends and colleagues about trying something different with the webinar series and having more of a conversation type style of webinar. I've invited two wonderful leaders, fabulous people, someone I've known for a little bit, especially through social media, and another that I've recently connected with and really have enjoyed her thoughts. And we'll get to introductions very soon, but I did want to kind of tell you a little bit what the difference of this series is. So one, it'll be the three of us chatting. We do have some focused topics and thoughts. However, because of the conversational nature, we do think that we might veer from the topic a little bit. Sort of think of a podcast where we don't want conversation to be stalled if there's some important things coming through. The other is the focus on storytelling and lived experiences. So kind of getting away from the show and tell of here, I'm from this institution and this is what I've done, but more of kind of sharing those experiences and what those have mean to us throughout our journey. And also the hope is that our guests and friends chat with each other as well. And so there's going to be a lot of questions. I don't think we're going to solve anything here today. In fact, I hope we have more questions than answers. But part of that is that journey and that critical thinking that gets us as a profession to really question what we do and think about how we can create change for the future. The chat is open, I believe, so you can feel free to use chat to connect with each other. If there's any questions specifically for the guests, we may not get to them, but if there are things like, oh, could you share that link or those resources, we will ensure that we get back to you after the webinar. It is being recorded, and so that we can get that information out to you. Outside of that, yeah, I think I guess another kind of caveat is because we want this to be authentic and real, maybe some colorful language might come out. We are talking about shared experiences and that. So, we're all mature adults and I think we can get through that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my two guests. So for again, Inclusive Workplace from a Woman Leadership Lens. And first we have Allie Bogard, who's the coordinator of intramural and club sports at Montana State University, Bozeman. And I kind of wanted to touch a little bit about her leadership experience. So she's currently the Region 6 rep. She served on the NIRSA Assembly, and that was with me. And actually, that's where I got to know Allie and her wonderful thoughts and her leadership. She was part of the NIRSA Foundation Young Donor Work Team, Global Perspective Strategic Values Commission. She's been on conference program committees and contributed to the NIRSA EDI Resource Guide as a case study author. And joining us today is also Victoria Lopez-Herrara, Senior Associate Director of Campus Recreation at the University of Texas at San Antonio. And she's had several different leadership positions with NIRSA, AOR, and Gamma Phi Beta. So with NIRSA, she's been an annual director of the Board of Directors, a board liaison to the Assembly, Strategic Planning Task Force, and on the Leadership Commission. With AOR, she's part of the Board of Directors and chair of the Bylaws Alignment Task Force. And Gamma Phi Beta, she's chair of the Belonging and Inclusion Task Force and Leadership Development Committee. So between the two of them, we have such a broad range of leadership accolades, as well as they're just wonderful people who really believe in people and the humanistic approach. So with that, I want to say hi. Good morning, Allie and Victoria. Let's start with Allie. Allie, I don't want to say, actually, what's important to you right now? What's your priority in life? And it doesn't have to be work. Just what's Allie all about right now?
Well, I would say well-being is going to be the first. I have not been the greatest at taking care of my personal well-being, to be completely honest. One of my strengths is empathy, and sometimes I struggle with giving too much empathy to others and not enough to myself. And so one big thing I'm trying to work on right now is extending that empathy to myself and focusing on that. And I think I don't know, another focus of mine right now is really inclusion. I live in Montana in a very, very, very white place. I grew up in Kentucky and lived in Ashland, Oregon for a little bit, which if you know anything about Oregon, Southern Oregon is also pretty white and very much lacks diversity. So really being challenged with the lack of diversity on our campus, and whether that be student population or in our department or in our division right now, especially, and knowing that without inclusive practices, we're not able to really embrace diversity or recruit that diversity. People need inclusion to be successful in their jobs, and without that, yeah, just a little bit struggling, I think, with where things are going on our campus right now, or how certain things in our world are impacting our work in higher education, and trying to figure out where I can best fit in that with my own strengths and my leadership position with the member network right now, and really connecting with folks in our region to see what their experiences have been, and how we're able to kind of what we're doing right now, sharing our stories. There's so much power in sharing our stories, and trying to facilitate that and figure out what that might look like, so we're able to learn from each other and move forward in our own learning and growth process.
Absolutely. You know, and that's, for me, I learned so much. Allie is very active on social media, Instagram and Twitter and the likes. But, you know, you talk about your own personal wellness journey, and how brave you are about sharing that on social media. I mean, that's how I feel like I know you, though. We've met once in person, I think, maybe at a national conference with the assembly. But, you know, I love just, especially, and then your Instagram feed with regards to a lot of the social justice movement, memes and information. I've learned tons. So if you're not following Allie on Instagram, you should, because she basically goes through all that material and gets the most salient and powerful ones and impactful ones and shares those. And I love it, because it's my daily dose of kind of that same struggle of going, oh man, we could be so much better. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. You know, I will add what you had said at the beginning of this. I cannot promise that there won't be any colorful language in any of those either, but.
Oh, I don't know. When you popped on the wrong webinar, you did say, gosh darn it. So that's how harsh it gets, and I think we'll be all right.
Already dropped an F-bomb before the call started.
I did. Oh, no. But, well, Victoria, what's important to you right now? What are you prioritizing in life?
Yeah, I'm a working mom, so I'm trying to figure out life and like the whole thing, and the blurring and swirling of all of my intersectioning identities. So like one of my strengths is futuristic, and since I cannot see the future or plan for the future because I don't know what's happening next week, it's actually kind of challenging. I don't know what's going to be happening with my sisters. I don't know. Like when it comes to my sorority sisters and my sorority, and like, is it going to be around in a year? With my children, like school, you know, well, at least we know it's not going to be in person. But there's also how do I help them learn and be teacher? How do I also be a good partner? And then among all of this, like, so I have my daughter, she was born with microtia and atresia. So microtia is the absence of the outer ear, and atresia is the absence of the ear canal on her right side. So she has a unilateral hearing loss. So she goes to a school for deaf children. And so does my son. He also attends that, but he's typical hearing. And so that is like another layer of like, how are we working on speech and language and learning in a virtual environment for, in particular, my daughter, who needs like some really, you know, solid attention to acquiring language, to listening skills, all of those things. And then on top of that, right, like I have two brown babies. I have two brown babies right now in the United States that we live in. And how do my husband and I go back and forth and talking about how do we raise our children to understand what's happening in the world, but they're also, she's 6, he's 9, you know, and how do we engage at that level through conversations instead of just like, oh, here's a storybook about, you know, people from different racial backgrounds. What are we seeing? We don't watch the news a whole lot. So it's more of like, how do we just kind of, we know what's happening and bring them into the world and not be completely isolated from what's happening in the world. And how are they going to kind of function in that? And then, you know, but on the work front, you know, I feel like there's just so much uncertainty. Like, am I going to have a job? Right. Like, you know, we don't really know come, I think right now I'm very fortunate and very appreciative that I am still employed. It looks differently, and I have a very supportive supervisor. But the powers that be it's not my supervisor and it's not me. So I think that's always a lingering thing too, of how long is this going to last? Will something else, drop? So there's lots going on in my head.
For sure. Wow. So actually, I mean, that it's a bit of a segue, I guess, into that idea of there's so much uncertainty right now. And when we think of, the idea of inclusion, especially through a woman's leadership lens, how do you feel that's changed given current political upheaval, just with COVID? Do you see a difference between kind of the expectations of inclusion through a woman's leadership lens? Where do you feel there's different expectations from either of you? Do you feel you have more of a voice or less of a voice? I know that's kind of a packed question, but how has what's happening in the world today either changed or reinforced some of those concerns or challenges of inclusion?
I'm gonna talk from my lens as a sorority woman. So I'm a member of Gamma Phi Beta and an active member, and closing up my role as the co-chair for the Belonging and Inclusion Task Force. But Gamma Phi Beta is a historically white organization. It was founded in 1874 at Syracuse University, and our leadership to this day is all white. And then with the Black Lives Movement gaining additional traction, all of the new incidents that are just refreshing and opening up wounds. A lot of collegiate women are now in a place where I feel many are, of like waking up, right? Like and demanding all of these things and change. And in the leadership ranks, I think it's similar to NIRSA, right? So like when you think about who do people have access to quickly, I'm someone that they have access to quickly. And so then it's like, Victoria, can you have these conversations? Can you talk about this? Can you come over here and host this conversation, right? Stephanie's right here. She's like, yes. All of a sudden now there is more, I think it's what's always happened, but now it's happening even more. And now it results in even more tiredness. And that's like the taxing of women, and in particular women of color. And so in this time, women having to step up to be the ones who are providing a nurturing environment, a place where people can come together and have conversations, or as a woman of color coming up and speaking about having conversations that are uncomfortable, being able to speak your truth or share your experiences. And again, it's that work. It is additional work. So right now I'm feeling as though I am working much more than I have pre-COVID. And that's because of the amplification of things that are layering on to themselves. So is it more open? Yes. Are people wanting to listen more? Yes. And as a result, I am working harder and a lot more.
And let me guess, not getting compensated for that extra work.
Right. But yeah, we are compensated for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is often the challenge in especially when change is afoot, then we turn to those that it's impacting and put that extra work on them, and especially not compensating for it. And that with everything else going on, that sounds very tiring.
It's like women's work, right? Like what people, it's like that stuff that we don't get paid for, right? And I would say for people of color, other people who have a disability, or GLBTQ community, right? Like it's the work. Like we got to do all the work, but we don't get paid for it. It's also not valued. It's not seen as something that you can compensate for, like money-wise, monetarily.
Yeah. And I mean, just being the token queer person, like, hey, can you lead our EDI training? Like, okay, yep, sure, I can do that. Like, I'm sure all these like white students who have grown up in Montana will really appreciate me talking, so. That has been a challenge for me, I think. I think kind of going back to like COVID and maybe where I'm feeling the impact personally would be, I was in a position where I'm ready to ask for like a salary increase or a title change, promotion. And more or less because I'm the only professional who oversees 28 clubs, 600 student athletes, fourth of our intramural population with 17,000 students. And I'm at the coordinator level getting paid pretty $5,000 less than I was getting paid in my previous position with the same cost of living, right? And so a big reason of coming here was that sense of belonging. And maybe I need to do a better job on the back end, I think, of figuring out what sense of belonging looks like for me in my job and how connected I need my coworkers and things like that to look like as well. And doing things outside of work together. But because of coronavirus and everything with budgets, that's now not the time for me to ask for that. And so feeling very much stunted in my professional career, or that I'm hitting my like glass ceiling. And so struggling with where to give my energy, or with that empath in me too of like, well, how much energy do I need to exert right now without totally draining myself and struggling with my own mental health. So trying to find that balance right now, and still be, somewhat, I guess, happy in my job is really a struggle. I shared something on my Instagram feed about a week ago or so that I actually saw a lot of other young professionals share. There's a Student Affairs Confessions Instagram page, and a lot of folks submit anonymous things through the messages, and so those are shared out. And I really appreciate following it because it's totally raw. But it said, I was asked the other day, are you happy in your job? And to be honest, I couldn't give an answer. I still don't know if I couldn't give an answer because I'm exhausted and overworked, or if my passion has been drained from me from constant battles with the higher administration on problematic decisions and processes. At what point am I sacrificing my own well-being because I am suffocating in a system that takes advantage of my deep care for my students? That one really resonated with me. So.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Wow.
Yes. And like, at what impact as a coordinator do I have up, I think has been challenging for me as well.
Mm-hmm. But, I've heard COVID being the accelerator, right? So it's not like these issues weren't there before, but now it's just accelerating those feelings, the impact it's having. And then it's hammering those that already were challenged. And, those that weren't, well, they're privileged enough to pivot, if that's the word people want to use. It's kind of hard to pivot when you've been battling and fighting these things for a while, and now something like COVID comes along and accelerates all those feelings and challenges and struggles. So, wow, thank you so much for sharing about that. So, to kind of come back to the way you're feeling, how does one thrive then? How does one take that? And and I know this is something you're struggling with, but how do you feel that you could thrive in this opportunity and give back, specifically the important stuff that you are sharing and that focus you have on inclusion, and to be able to have that voice heard rather than feeling the challenges and that weight? How can someone thrive in this environment?
Yeah. That's a really damn good question, to be honest. Gosh, I think, focusing where we put our energy and making sure that where we're putting our energy fills our bucket. Right now, working with my club sports student athletes does not fill my bucket. Working with my student employees one-on-one and like helping them with their mental health and improving that totally is filling my bucket. Or my volunteer position with NIRSA right now. I'm so thankful I have that, because if I'm being honest, I don't know if I would stay in higher education right now if I didn't have it. I don't know. I think just focusing on hope too, and like using your network, like reaching out to your mentors. Kevin Marbury is one of my mentors, and having just a really good conversation with him last week of like, I don't know if my well-being can sustain a profession or a career in this profession has been like the big thing for me lately. And higher ed is all I've known. Like my first real job in college was working freshman year, intramural official. I grew up in small town Kentucky. So before that, it was all farm work and babysitting. Like that, this has been the only thing I know. And so if not campus rec, what is it? What's not higher ed, not working in a college environment? What is that? So that's been a struggle for me. And so reaching up to who I need to and reaching in and just having some really heavy, vulnerable introspection time and trying to embrace my feelings. Yeah, that's been the the start for me right now. I don't know if that necessarily is helping me thrive, but at least trying to figure it out and sort those pieces together.
Mm-hmm. Victoria?
I'm a thinker, and I go for walks every morning and just, like by myself. I've also enlisted one of my supervisees, and so we'll have a 6 a.m. one-on-one every Tuesday because we're both out walking. So that has been helpful because then I'm outside, I'm outdoors, I'm not in front of a computer, and I can think because I definitely need that time to think. And other places, especially when it comes to can we talk about enter whatever is related to social justice, right? Like, fill in the blank. And I've gotten to a place where I ask people, who else do you know that you can have this conversation with? Who else? What are you doing? What are you doing? Because I'm now in a place where, like, I can't create a specialized curriculum for you, and I don't have an hour of time to comfort you in your tears. It's kind of like I'm in a place where it's like, where is your work? How about we start off there? And here are some other people that you can, and start to like delegate, right? More like starting to delegate, because I can't do it for you. I can't, so it's, and to be able to ask for help in that way. So for example, again, just going back to my Gamma Phi Beta experience in particular with this task force right now, we now have like 100,000 women asking for information. And it's like, we have systems in place that we've created and we've wanted to enact. And I'm asking from our highest levels, can you make this go faster? I need this to go faster because I need other people to do this work too. It can't just be me and my partner. So being able, like Allie said, to like reach up and out of, hey, I need y'all, I need more people, I need help, I need you, other people to start doing the work as well in order to move forward. So that way then I can focus on the things that make me happy. Like I'm innovative and I enjoy getting ideas, and I need that walk. I need that time to clear my mind to think about, in this new space in COVID, like, how is our department going to continue to thrive and demonstrate that we are an essential part of the student experience? What else can we provide beyond just, let's go ahead and put group exercise classes on Zoom? Like, that's not all we do. What else can we do? What else can we show outside of that so that people can also understand and hear our story? But I need the space, I need the time to be able to do that.
You ask about help. How does that help come when it seems that you're being asked because there's no one else to help? There's no one that with that experience or knowledge. And then of course, then it's a doubly tiring, because now not only am I being asked to do this extra work, but now I'm being asked to teach, educate through this process that's new to them. And, and that's upwards often too, right? That's training upwards to senior leadership and that, and helping them understand that, how does one do that and keep saying? Maybe you don't.
It's hard when you're the only one. I've been the only one in many spaces. I don't know about how y'all.
Well, I want to, one of the reasons the two of you, and I didn't know this at the time, which was this awesome, this synergy, was I invited both of you separately, and then realizing you actually have a history together. Through the Global University intersection of health and well-being through a woman's leadership lens that brought you to Costa Rica. Can you tell me a little bit about what that meant for your individual journeys and also your relationship? And in our pre-chat, you talked a lot about how the support system that you got from each other just through the program in and of itself, not necessarily the teachings, but the time you spent together and the stories and the experiences you shared.
You want me to start?
Sure. I'm just going to do a quick little,
Yes,
what
please.
is Global University?
That'd be wonderful.
So Global University is a program out of AOR, and in 2019, AOR partnered with NIRSA, and there were 16 women from across both industries. So we had women who are work in municipalities, for state nonprofit organizations, as well as in higher education in some way, shape, or form. Some women are professional outdoors women, and others, like me, are not. So we had the full spectrum that all went to Costa Rica, and we spent 9 days together. It was also, it was hosted by G Adventures. G Adventures is not a small travel, they're an international company, but they take small groups to different parts of the world. And they also, and it's not your usual, like, let's go see all the usual touristy things. And they stay at local entities and patronize local entities. So it's really truly about using your dollar to impact the local economy there. They also have a Planetera Foundation, which will take their travelers to these, we'll just say groups, right? It could be any kind of things that are happening to patron that particular entity and whatever it is that they're working on. So in Costa Rica in particular, we went to a coffee farm for a local coffee co-op. Allie.
Yeah, well, I actually first met, I guess I didn't really meet Victoria then, but Denver annual conference. Victoria was one of the guest speakers for Women Leading Women pre-con. And I was super struggling in my job at the time and had lost like 25, 30 pounds from stress and had no support from my supervisor. Very toxic work environment, and totally needed to hear everything that was happening. Kara Lucia is one of my mentors as well, and hearing how her perception of how I looked at the beginning of the conference to the end was, just a total 180. But definitely needing that, I think, yeah, definitely needing that at the time. That was the hope that I needed. So Victoria's presentation on her 15 strategies for building self-efficacy really have resonated with me then and still do. And I think the next time I was able to talk to Victoria in person was ERSL at Prairie View A&M. And was just like, hey, I don't think you know how much like your presentation and who you are meant to me and my growth and like what I needed at that time. And since then, I just really stayed in touch for the most part. And then we were in beautiful Costa Rica together. In general, I do not feel like if that was not a women's only trip, I would feel the same way about it, to be honest. I think that was the key thing for me. The level of vulnerability and authenticity that we were all able, I feel like I have never been able to truly be myself outside of that group, to be honest. So I don't know, the powers that be, Pam, Jeanette, Erin O'Sullivan, and Victoria, Lisa Limler, who put this together. I think a lot of conversations too about deviant leadership. And for me, that really resonated. I've always been very passionate about what I do. And of course, as a woman, that comes off as me being emotional. I don't know how many times I've been told by the same former supervisor, to manage that. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not crying, I'm not cussing at you, I'm not yelling. Like, am I really being too emotional? Also having that, inclusive, comfortable space to vent. That's what you need. That's where we're able to find a resolution, right? So I don't know, just really, I think a lot with my leadership journey and reflecting a lot on myself and who I want to be and how I want to lead. As a student, being told by my supervisor that I needed to smile more was one for me that was just like, whoo, okay, like going through the years as a professional, kind of going back in some of the things that were said to me, or how as a woman, 6 years working in undergrad and grad school, never feeling comfortable enough to speak up, or by the time at the end of those meetings, after 4 years of being in that leadership position for the same time, that why would I speak up? Because I'm totally going to get shut down by him. Or, yeah. And so honestly, just sharing those talking about those experiences, sharing those experiences, we have all had them, was so powerful for me. And I think, yeah, I just really ignited that you are who you are and you need to lead that way and not apologize to anyone for the way that you lead, was huge for me. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. And we'll get back to this, so think about this, but I really love what you said about, kind of your authentic self and its role it plays in belonging. How can you thrive at a workplace when you're not bringing your authentic self, when you're worried about being shut down for bringing who you are and the experiences and the knowledge and everything that comes with that, and to be told that's not okay. That's awful. And so, I want to kind of get back to authenticity later on about, that struggle of being able to say, this is who I am and this is what you get, and value that. Don't, and not just, well, this is good, but if you would just smile more, why does that have anything to do with what I'm bringing to the table? So thanks for sharing. Victoria?
For me, when it comes to I feel my purpose in life is to provide women with opportunities for them to discover and develop their own self-efficacy, right? Their own awesomeness, whatever it is there. So strategies, experiences, discussions, ways that they can discover it. That's what I'm for. That is what I'm all about. And it started in Campus Rec because I saw our female officials from the time that they started their position to the time that they graduated, the women rocked it. So I was like, what are we doing that is awesome, right? Like, that's where it started for me. And then this particular experience for Global University, I would say first and foremost, and I know she's on the call, and I'm not saying this just because in here, I see her in the chat. It's not just because she's on here, because I've told her as well. My supervisor is a woman, and she is very supportive. And if she had not supported me going on this, like, it was a new concept, right? Like, I'm gonna help support you with your professional development funds, Victoria, so you can go to Costa Rica. Like, like somebody else could have been like, no, like, no. But the fact that it was, all women, and we were there to learn and discover and think about what we can bring back and how it would impact us. Like, it started with her saying yes, and then getting there, and then everybody else being like, yes, we are here. Let's talk about this. Like, what is going on? There was, a leadership model that we used. We talked through all of those, the deviant leadership through, framing leadership and what does it mean in higher education and in our world. And I would echo with Allie, it was a lot of, those individual conversations outside of that, right? So as you get to, the outdoors is a really great vehicle for really just tearing down barriers and really showing you who you really are, because you never know what Mother Nature is going to throw at you. And we had some very scary moments. We had some very fun moments. We cried. And it was being able to have that camaraderie and that connection. And I would say as a result of that, right, you find connections with different people. And so being there, right, like, so you're sweaty and you're hot, you're in the middle of, the forest, but somebody says something and you're like, oh my God, let's talk more about that. Let's get into this. Let's talk more about our fears. And as a result, like, I'll say, so Lisa and I, we still talk often, even now during COVID. I joined the board of directors for AOR because Jeanette was on the trip with us. She learned about my experience on the NIRSA board, and she asked, would I be interested? And Laura said yes again. And so Laura has allowed me to volunteer and be in these roles. And so that's how I got on the board of AOR, right? And so still to this day, and being connected with Allie, like, as a result of that experience and those that trip, there are a lot of ripple effects that happen. There are 2 women who have had children during COVID that we've all been a part of and shared, and those kinds of things. So it's been a really great experience. And so coming back, right, and how do I apply it to work, thinking about how as a senior associate director also support outdoor pursuits. How am I another voice? I don't directly oversee outdoor pursuits, but how do I also help support that area, those students, and my coworker, in providing resources to them and helping them, as well as then just the value of women coming together, like being an amplifier. Like, it's important, and it makes a difference. It makes a positive impact on us when we're able to come together and connect.
You both mentioned deviant leadership. Can you expand on that topic? And I think we've heard examples of it, already, but, and maybe we don't need specific people, but what does that term mean to you, and how have you experienced it?
So it's this box, right? This box of what leadership is supposed to look like and be like that we've been taught. There's a manual that's out there that I don't know, I haven't read it, but I know it exists, right? Of what it's supposed to look like. But then through our lens and as women, how do we act differently from that? How is it how are we a compassionate disruptor, and show up in our true authentic self, and do it our way. So and when we think about, and I had a really great, one of the profound conversations was, I'm really not interested in, moving. When I was first entering higher ed, it was like, I want to be, vice president of student affairs. And now after years, I'm like, hell no, I ain't gonna be a vice president of student affairs. I don't want to do that. But then it was like, well, because you've always, now with your experience in higher ed, it's like being a VP of student affairs looks like this. Who has typically filled those roles? White men, right? And so I see the way that they do it, but how would you do it? What could you do? What do you do differently, and make that into your own role, your own way of being and doing? I still don't want to be vice president of student affairs, but what I took away from that conversation was, it's how do you break through, the box, and be okay with making it your own.
Mm-hmm. I think Victoria hit the nail on the head on what it is. I think an example for me has been, going back to that former professional position. I won the social justice, the Braden Scholarship for Social Justice that year. And we were building a rec center at my institution, about to open probably in 3 or 4 months. And kind of the last straw for me was my supervisor saying, well, you're not going to the NIRSA conference. And I was like, not going to the NIRSA conference. Okay. Like, all right, well, good thing. Like I'm ready to take my leave from work, because I've lost 20 or 30 pounds at this point. And my therapist was like, dude, you need to take your medical leave from work. Like, I'm going to write you a recommendation. Like, you need to focus on yourself and spend that time with your job search. And I had that support from our VP as well. And I think for me, it was like, well, no, that is what I need right now. I know that my well-being needs my NIRSA family and that connection to literally survive. My mental health was not in a good place at all. So just taking that leave and being like, well, I'm going to the conference. I'm going to pay my way there. And slept on my Aunt Doris's couch in her room, and yep, took advantage. So I think for me, an example of that has been, well, I know what I need right now, and I'm going to go after it and get it, regardless of what that means. I'm going back to having a conversation I had with Mo McGonigal that in December of that year, and was like, is it super unprofessional of me to do this? And she was like, well, Allie, I think you need to make a decision and figure out the difference between what's unprofessional and what is what you value and what you need and want to do. And so that one has consistently resonated with me, and something I think I still have in the back of my mind when I'm making those decisions, or whenever I'm like, no, that doesn't sit with me right. How do I want to approach that? And so I think that's an example for me. Not allowing, I think, the system to control me, I think, was really big. When I was going through that at work, I didn't feel like I had the support from HR. They were supporting my supervisor. Even though I was making complaints through our Title IX office, that was clearly like not being communicated. Having said supervisor try to tell me I was going to pay for the students conference travel expenses and everything out of pocket, and that the student wasn't going. And then just, okay, well, like, I'm going to fight back. Like, I'm not paying for that. And trying to figure out what that looks like feeling attacked and pretty hopeless in this higher education system when HR doesn't support you and you don't have that support from your supervisor, was really challenging for me. And I don't think I would have been able to do that if I didn't have this like foundation or like these awesome mentors who kind of taught me underlying deviant leadership. And then as we're in Costa Rica, like learning about it and being like, damn, a lot of my actions really, that the core is at that is in deviant leadership. I think kind of going back to what I said earlier as well about just not apologizing for it either. You in certain times need to do what's best for you and your health and well-being. And when you're being shafted or whatever that might look like, okay, cool. Like this, I'm not going to take that. Is kind of I guess been my experiences more or less.
Well, it's hard when you say I'm not going to take that, but there's repercussions, right?
Yeah, totally.
No,
So I didn't submit that. Yeah, I did not submit that letter of complaint or saying I wasn't going to pay those charges until after I put in my 2 weeks and had a
right.
job.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yep.
And then being labeled as disruptive and, you know, taking all that.
Totally. And
you know,
yeah, just like that, you know, and yes. And like, well, what, you know, there are core people there for sure who know me and know what was going on and were the ones who were supporting me. But the people in our department who might not have known that totally might have a completely different perception of me.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it, you know, with the idea of starting off this webinar with the idea of the NIRSA family. It's amazing how I know I've done it personally, same thing of feeling that, you know, a toxic environment in a workplace or, you know, I've reached out to NIRSA family and people, you know, and we're mentioning a lot of the same names of people that I've looked up to and learned from that I didn't get earlier on in my career. But there's that balance of, you know, it kind of comes to you, Victoria, of saying, well, you know, there's a book out there, but I don't have it. And I can do it differently, but you know, there's that in between. Well, I'm not being invited to do it differently, so I can't make that change yet. I'm not included to do that or welcome to be that voice. Yet I'm getting encouragement from different areas. So how do I impact change where I'm at? Where do I, you know, instead of thinking I got to get out of this profession, I got to get out of this institution, I got to change leaders. You know, there's that point where you get stuck thinking, well, I don't I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. So, you know, Allie kind of sounds like you're in the middle of that. Victoria, you've talked about, you know, having a senior leader that's supportive and that's, you know, how important that is. How do we find invitations to do those changes and become that leader that you're speaking of, to saying, I don't need to go from the same manual. This is, I mean, it's an outdated form of leadership. It's people are saying it's not okay, yet we're still seeing it's prevalent and its actions happening, you know, even at the highest office where, you know, this is still going on. How do you navigate that?
You know, one of the things when Allie mentioned my strategies, one of them is trying to change from mean girls to mighty girls. And how do we unlearn the mean girl mentality of taking each other down and trying to pull each other down instead of how about we empower each other? And for me, I found that the greatest successes or the moments that I have felt that I belong the most, especially in NIRSA, has been because other women have amplified me or have said yes, opened doors, or pulled me along. Before becoming in collegiate recreation, I was in residence life, and I was also a fraternity and sorority advisor. So I was often, as a fraternity and sorority advisor, talking to all men's organizations run by only men, and constantly being challenged about my intellectuality, right? Like my authority, you know, my competence. And when I entered my job, I would say I met that exact same thing with men in our department, of like, who are you? Let me question you. And it really was being able to also talk about it with my supervisor and have that like, nope, that's not what I see, Victoria. That's not why you're here. And even after, I really appreciate the experience I had as a fraternity and sorority advisor and working with all men's organizations, because it really did provide that development of the tougher skin. If I had continued to experience that and wasn't able to navigate that pushback and the doubt in my competence going into a new role, I don't think that I would have been as successful as I am now or feel as though I belong as much as I do now. I know that other women feel that, especially in NIRSA as a male-dominated field. I know that also when I was on the board as a Latina being appointed to the board, you know, I know that there were conversations of like more women on the board. Now we got a Latina on the board. Like, you know, like God forbid a Latina have a brain and can make, you know, like be somebody else, another woman, right? Leah recognized that I have something to contribute, and she invited and appointed me, and the board affirmed, you know, that, right? So Laura saw me, a fraternity and sorority advisor, right? And grabbing a fraternity and sorority advisor into collegiate recreation, right? Like bridging that, getting involved in with the Leadership Commission and with the EDI Summit as well. Kara, it was me connecting with Kara and Kara saying, this woman has something to offer. And other spaces as well. Erin, who's on the NIRSA headquarters stuff, I don't know how many of you know her, but Erin has been a great amplifier for me. Like she has helped put me into spaces and bring my name up because we've been able to connect, and she feels as though I have something to offer, and that I feel valued that way. And so I think that as women, if we are able to do that for each other, so I've been able to host a lot of roundtables during COVID. You know, I brought Nicole and I brought Erin and Erin Patchett I've Belinda, who is a grad assistant onto the Latinx caucus. So I'm actively trying to find other women to bring them in and amplify them. That's how I think it can work. That's the strategy for me.
Mm-hmm. Vicky High Street just put in something in the chat that also thing about generational differences. My experiences as a young professional, I think my first 6 bosses, 5 of them were women and 1 was a gay man. And how that shaped my professional journey, I'm sure it played a huge impact. But in thinking of the generational leadership of the women, my first director in campus rec, she retired probably 20 years ago, and saw that coming back to that Mean Girls, where she was was deemed a battle axe and tough, and she needed to do that to be in this. She was also an athletic director, and to thrive in that landscape, that's what she needed to be. And yet we saw that impact of the other women staff being put down and pushed down when they didn't embody that well, I had to fight through this. So what do you see in that generational aspect of women leaders and that support and empowerment? Victoria, it sounds like from Lauren you're getting that. Allie, it sounds like you're still trying to find that maybe within your own workplace. Where are we going, I guess, through that generation? How is that changing?
Allie, you're in a different generation from me, so maybe you can chat.
Yeah. I feel like younger professionals, like the empowered women empower women, right? Like I feel like we're much like that's a unified, like we all pretty much feel that way. It's a really good question.
I guess one of the things, to maybe bridge this is it sounds like there's more invitation happening, more voices empowering, more people, putting others in front of the spotlight or whatever that looks like. And also that power of invitation of saying, hey, Allie, you've got, for a young professional, you've got an impressive leadership, resume. How do you get involved in those? Were they personal invitations from mentors, other women? Was it things you sought out going, well, I need to be involved or find my sense of belonging? How did that come about?
I mean, same as Victoria, like totally amplified by my women mentors. My Aunt Darcy being one was like, you should really like look into this Global Perspectives Commission. They need a student. And it was, that was the first one. And so being on that for like 3 or 4 years that we had that. And then Kira being another one for me of like, you should consider the assembly, or I feel like women who are, as having as much experience, around that level as like Victoria, Stephanie, like those women are still very much empowering other women. I think like, and Vicky's just really woke, to be honest, right? Like, I am really, I don't know if I might be totally off on this too. But women who have led the way for us and who are starting to lead the way have been spending so much of their energy on fighting that perhaps some of that same, like it has been harder to pass that down, or maybe there at the time wasn't another woman to pass that down to. So I don't know. I don't really know where for me, my former supervisor is our director of student life woman. Like she was the epitome of a female leader for me, and being able to work with her and being so thought-provoking all the time was wonderful, and knew so much of what I was going through. And in a meeting, if my supervisor interrupted me, she's like, excuse me, I want to hear Allie's thought. She needs to finish, right? And so even just being that person in the meeting that's like, nope, I want to hear her, like as a woman, I'm supporting this other woman in the room right now, and interrupting her. I don't know. Yep, just kind of talking on this one, but I don't really know what the generational differences are.
Vicky put into the chat, like being the boomer generation, I hate it when people look at me and think I will lead a certain way. I want to be looked at as an individual who can be a good listener and lead other individuals in the way they need to be led. And I think that's like that disruptive leadership, right? Like I feel there are these lovely labels and boxes that we get to put people into. and then how do we amplify and show up for each other in different ways, right? So again, like how do I check myself about what box I just put you in? But then as well as a sister in the struggle, right? Like how do I also amplify? Well, Allie just said, well, Allie, to talk about what Allie just mentioned, right? Putting it out there again and again.
So knowing your experience and then now your roles as leaders and mentors, how are you mentoring future leaders, and how are you helping them feel like they belong in this space, that they can bring their authentic selves, that they have a voice, and that, you know, maybe it's time to write new manuals and new playbooks that resonate and are more impactful for the people that we're serving and leading?
I ask people I invite anyone and I put myself out there, like, but it has to be you that needs to show up, right? So like, I'm here for you if you want to take advantage of me being here for you. And like for women, it'll always come first. What do you need? What can I help you? Especially women of color, you know, like how can we connect? What can I do? But I also need you to do the work. So it's not just going to be me feeding you everything and telling you how to do things, but how do we engage in the dialogue for the long haul, and not just like a one-time, like, oh, can you be my mentor? And there's like one meeting. Like we got to do it together.
Allie, with the students that you lead, how are you allowing them to be authentic?
I'm big on one-on-one connections with my students in general. And so as much as I can find time outside of our office for us to like go on a walk or get breakfast or get coffee or whatever that might be, that having that really informal time has led me to the trust that I've been able to build with my students to build the team that I want to. I think even just giving them a really safe place to cry. I cry with my students all the time, probably once a week, to be honest. Like there are probably 3 or 4, and 3 of them are men who come in my office just to let it out. And I am such an empath that it's like instantly talking to them. It's like, oh, like, yes, like, you know, I'm going to totally cry with you. And just providing that support system, I think, has been huge. But I think too, going back to what Victoria says, like they have to want it, they need to seek it out. Being intentional about the folks that reach out and mentor, and instead of really spreading that too much and not being able to give that intentionality. Like how many people do I actually have the time to mentor right now that are seeking that out, or how many people are actively seeking it out, and, you know, whatever, who can I, you know, like set over here to the side for a second, like hasn't been reaching out and is totally fine. But I know that I can revisit that relationship at any time, Victoria, right? Like, so I can call up the phone and cry to Victoria at any time I need to. Yeah, I don't know. I think just having that open dialogue and trust and space is huge.
It's the connection. I'm sorry, Mark. The connection of it. I want to share a story. Zenaida Ortiz, she's at the University of Texas at Arlington, and she's in fitness there. And so she's reached out, and she and I have continued to have a connection. And there was last year, NIRSA. So for a couple of years, I've been able to be very fortunate to represent NIRSA internationally. And there was a conference last summer in Monterrey, and we had to again give a presentation in Spanish. And Zenaida was someone that I thought about to bring along and to mentor her and get her built up to be comfortable. I mean, she's a GX instructor, so she's used to being in front of people, but presenting at a professional conference in Spanish is very different than leading a group exercise class, right? And so, you know, there was a lot of work there of like, how is she going to talk to her supervisors about this? How is she going to talk to her family about this? Her family was a very big component of this. Her being able to go to Mexico, like, you know, like already, and when you go to Mexico, people are already like, where in Mexico are you going? But you know, to get to that conference and there, and you know, mentoring her through the actual like presentation process and the presentation itself. When we got there, and I know Aaron's camera is off because Aaron was with us. When we got there and we did the presentation, I failed. I completely failed. And Sinead soared. She was amazing. And then Aaron brought it home and like home run bat out of the park. And I was in tears and I just felt horrible about my performance. But Sinead and Aaron, they did such an amazing job. And I think that was one of the most profound experiences of being able to see someone that you connect with and mentor, and they outshine you and they just knock it out of the park. It was great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Last question, because I'm aware of time, but you know, again, when we talk about this sharing and this authenticity and making these connections, why is it we're making these connections with a NIRSA family that is separated by, in some places, countries and borders, and you know, and we're having because we talk about trust and we talk about, you know, that's hard because we're building trust in such a small interactions, and we're feeling comfortable sharing, you know, to a lot of people we don't know, yet we're having these difficulties at work with people that hopefully hired us because they liked what they saw, you know, they're supervising us and are in charge of our well-being and our mentoring, yet we're seeing that lack in our workplaces and finding it elsewhere. And so why? Why do I feel so comfortable talking to both, you know, Allie and Victoria about this and seeking out more of it when we have such different experiences? We're not talking about similar institutions. We're not talking about, you know, a shared supervisor, but just why is that trust here? How has that been developed, and why can we not develop it in our workplaces? And really, I think that's kind of, for me, speaks to inclusion. I feel like I belong in this conversation. I feel like I can learn and I can grow from it. I can feel empowered. Yet, going back to the place that hires and pays and wants us, there's that lack of sense of belonging sometimes. And not for everyone, but for many, there's that feeling of, I'm not sure I belong here. And there's that prolonged feeling. And it's hard to feel included when you don't feel like you belong.
And finding that out of work person, I think it's important to our well-being as well. And perhaps thinking about where, you know, what Allie had mentioned earlier about what's bringing me joy and where am I finding it in pockets. And so trying to piece it together to navigate and negotiate that happiness for wherever it might be. So why is it not some places than others? I think it's a way that it's a strategy.
Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts, Allie, on that?
No, I don't know if I have too much more to add. Still thinking too much on that one.
Well, we are at 11. I could talk with the two of you for hours and hours. So thank you so much for the vulnerability, the authenticity, the bravery of sharing the story, your experiences. You know, I think, to me, one of the things we lack is that storytelling, that on being able to hear and understand and empathize someone's journey and what they've experienced. And I think the more we're able to do that, the more hopefully change will happen, because we can start feeling as it's not about you know, a playbook or a manual that was written somewhere. It's understanding that things can be different and learning and listening. So thank you so much for your voices today. I greatly appreciate that. Just for a quick plug for next week, this will be a continuing ongoing series, and next week we're going to be talking about creating sense of belonging in campus recreation with Mo McGonigal and Anaja Newsom. So hopefully we will continue the great energy and sharing and experiences that we got today from Allie and Victoria. So thank you so much. Again, if anyone else, we will go through the chat. So if you have any last seconds questions, we'll leave this up so you can add them and then we can get back to you. But thank you very, very much. Thank you, NIRSA family, for attending today. And we'll hopefully see you next week. Thanks so much.